The lore of Bloodborne is dark, and I mean that in more ways than one. Not only is most of the game's story hidden from the player, but it also touches on some deeply disturbing and unsettling subject matters. Alien entities forcefully impregnating women.
It can't be! This is a nightmare!
Orphans being used as test subjects for nefarious experiments.
My baby! My precious little baby!
Mass slaughterings of entire villages in the pursuit of a higher purpose.
Byrgenwerth, blasphemous murderers, blood-crazed fiends.
Brutal research that completely disregards human life.
Kill me, please, just kill me.
And a corrupt religious organization masquerading themselves as saviors.
Not a pretty sight, is it? The true face of the blood-worshipping, beast-purging, healing church.
Much of these horrific plot points went over my head when I played the game as a young boy almost a decade ago. Aside from my own ineptitude and naivety, there is a very good reason for this. Bloodborne has one of the most complex, intricate, and ambiguous stories that I have ever encountered. Even amongst the rest of From Software's games, it stands out as being notoriously difficult to understand. This was undoubtedly an intentional decision, playing into the game's Lovecraftian themes, but a substantial portion of the confusion surrounding the lore of Bloodborne has arisen from the nuances between the original Japanese text and the English localization. When translating information from one language to another, it is almost inevitable that some of the more subtle meaning is lost. A YouTuber by the name of Last Protagonist has put in a tremendous amount of effort in creating an Excel spreadsheet that retranslates every piece of information found in Bloodborne from the original Japanese text. This is what I will be using to aid me in uncovering the game's profoundly mysterious secrets. The story of Bloodborne is one that spans several centuries. It's a story about the hubris of man, forbidden knowledge, unspeakable atrocities, and unfathomable consequences. In this video, I aim to shed some light on Bloodborne's tragically dark story. Bloodborne's plot begins long before the events of the actual game. Long ago, beneath where the city of Yharnam would eventually be founded, a massive underground labyrinth was carved out by an ancient civilization of people known as the Pthumerians. In these labyrinths, the Pthumerians would make contact with the Great Ones, extraterrestrial cosmic entities with power that defies all comprehension. After encountering the eldritch truth, the Pthumerians would revere the Great Ones as gods, serving them as guardians. Over time, they would elect themselves a leader. The chosen monarch was traditionally a woman and would be given as an offering to the Great Ones to bear a special child. One of these chosen monarchs was Queen Yharnam, who the city of Yharnam would later be named after. Queen Yharnam would become pregnant with a child by the name of Mergo. The father is almost certainly the Great One Odin, as he is the only known Great One shown to impregnate women. Odin is formless, existing only in voice, meaning that reproduction does not occur by typical means. Tragically, Queen Yharnam's baby would not survive the pregnancy. Based on the bloodstains around her abdomen and the sacred heirloom she keeps on her, it is likely that Queen Yharnam suffered a failed abdominal pregnancy, resulting in a lithopedion or stone baby. A lithopedion is formed in rare instances where the fetus develops outside the uterus in the abdomen and dies. The dead fetal tissue is subsequently calcified, producing a stone-like appearance. Inspecting the Yharnam stone which the queen keeps on her, we see what appears to be the crystallized remains of her child, along with her placenta. Notably, the umbilical cord is missing. This is incredibly important, so keep it in mind for later. The unfortunate demise of Yharnam's baby Mergo did not happen by chance. On the contrary, it was an unavoidable outcome. In Bloodborne, every Great One inevitably loses its child. This is not a prophecy as some have theorized. It is simply an inability of the Great Ones to produce viable offspring. In the Drained of Blood interview with game director Hidetaka Miyazaki, he stated that the Great Ones have all lost their children because of their positions. When it comes to living creatures, the stronger or more advanced you are, the fewer offspring you produce in your life. In essence, he is trying to say that the Great Ones have advanced and evolved to such a stage as a species that they are no longer able to reproduce. Sometime after the demise of Mergo, most of the Great Ones would leave our plane of existence and ascend into the cosmos. The reason behind their departure will be discussed a bit later. The Pthumerians would go on to build the city of Yharnam. Some would remain within the labyrinth, while others moved to the surface, as well as other lands. Over time, knowledge of the eldritch truth would fade, and the Great Ones almost forgotten. However, this would all change with Byrgenwerth.
Byrgenwerth is an old place of learning. Everything sacred in Yharnam can be traced back to Byrgenwerth.
Byrgenwerth was an old institute of learning, located just outside of Yharnam, where scholars would search for greater potential in mankind. The most notable early members of Byrgenwerth were Master Willem, Laurence, Mikolash, and Carol. Master Willem was the founder of the organization, and the rest his students. Together, they would end up discovering the labyrinths carved out by the Pthumerians. However, the tombs proved to be too dangerous for a measly group of scholars. As a result of their proximity and contact with the Great Ones, the Pthumerians developed superhuman abilities and powers. According to the Bone Ash armor set, some even gained eternal life. This explains why they are still around even after all this time. Despite the Great Ones having departed, the Pthumerians would still uphold their role as guardians of the tomb. They would not let anyone pass. To deal with the perilous foes occupying the labyrinth, Byrgenwerth would recruit a man by the name of Gehrman. He served as a sort of early tomb prospector or hunter precursor, exterminating anything in Byrgenwerth's path. In battle, Gehrman was without equal. The man had a frightening talent for killing. With the Pthumerians no longer an issue, the Byrgenwerth scholars were free to explore the labyrinth, and it is here they came into contact with the eldritch truth, a holy medium that would lead to the foundation of the healing church and the establishment of blood healing.
Once, a group of young Byrgenwerth scholars discovered a holy medium deep within the tomb. This led to the founding of the healing church and the establishment of blood healing.
There have been many arguments as to what this holy medium was exactly. I would propose that it was a Brightus, the left-behind Great One. Many people are under the impression that the first contact humanity had with the Brightus was through the choir, a subsect of the healing church formed much later. However, this is not the case. The confusion arises from the English description of the augur of a Brightus, which reads, "Remnant of the eldritch truth encountered at Byrgenwerth." The initial encounter marked the start of an inquiry into the cosmos from within the old labyrinth, and led to the establishment of the choir. The wording here does not make it overly apparent that Byrgenwerth were the ones who first met a Brightus, but the Japanese text is much clearer, stating that the augur of a Brightus is a remnant of the arcane Byrgenwerth once encountered. Its chance encounter was what began the inquiry into the search of the cosmos in the underground ruins, the aftermath of which is connected to the choir. This makes it very evident that a Brightus was the holy medium Byrgenwerth discovered in the labyrinth, and is what served as the catalyst for their pursuit into the arcane. This theory is further supported by a character called Alfred, who says,
I have heard that the holy medium of blood healing is venerated in the main cathedral.
And deep within the depths of the Grand Cathedral, we find a Brightus, who was later brought there by the choir. Lastly, the description of the Great Eye's chalice in Japanese states that it finally allowed the choir to meet Abritus. This suggests that they specifically knew of her beforehand, which would have only been possible if Abritus had previously been encountered by their predecessors, in other words, Byrgenwerth. Although Abritus is referred to as a Great One in-game, this is not exactly the case. Her actual classification based on enemy type is that of a kin. Kin are described as brethren of the Great Ones, so while they can be thought of as closely related to the Great Ones, they are not the same. The key defining trait of kin is that they were all once human, and through one way or another, acquired cosmic power. Some kin have been more successful in this task than others, with a select few such as Abritus obtaining power comparable to that of a Great One. I will refer to such entities as kin Great Ones in order to distinguish them from the rest. However, it should be noted that these kin Great Ones are still lesser beings, bound to a single plane of existence. This explains why Abritus is referred to as left behind, as she would not have had the ability to move between dimensions like the true Great Ones. The identity of Abritus before her ascension remains a mystery, although given that she was found in the labyrinth, we can assume that she was once a Pthumerian. The method of her ascension is even more unclear, but it was most certainly facilitated through the power of a Great One. Upon encountering this unfathomable eldritch being, the Byrgenwerth scholars would conduct all manner of research to learn more about Abritus and the Great Ones. Examining the head of Abritus, it almost looks as if the flesh on her face has been pulled apart, exposing the tissue underneath, although this could very well just be her design. In either case, looking at the opening, some of her brain seems to be exposed, and it is filled with a numerous amount of eyes. This discovery is likely what led to Master Willem's obsession with eyes. The eye rune states that eyes symbolize the truth Master Willem sought in his research. Disillusioned by the limits of human intellect, Master Willem looked to beings from higher planes for guidance, and sought to line his brain with eyes in order to elevate his thoughts. The Japanese text provides further clarity, stating that the eye rune was created as a representation of the abandoned Great One's voice. This further cements the theory that Abritus was the progenitor of Byrgenwerth's and Willem's philosophy.
Eyes. Eyes. Where are the eyes? I need more. I can't see.
Aside from eyes on the inside, the other great discovery Byrgenwerth made was the miraculous healing properties of Abritus's blood. The blood of the Great Ones and their kin would later be referred to as the Old Blood. The discovery of blood made Byrgenwerth's dream of evolution a reality. However, the discovery of blood also entailed the discovery of undesirable beasts. While some of the scholars believed that the Old Blood was the key to humanity's evolution, others were more fearful of it. One scholar in particular, by the name of Carroll, provided ample warnings about the dangers of the Old Blood. Through exposure to the eldritch truth, Carroll was able to gain enough insight to hear the mutterings of Great Ones, even from across dimensions. Though the words could not be translated into human language, Carroll transcribed them into symbols that would later be referred to as Carroll runes. Carroll described the beast as a horrific and unwelcome instinct deep within the hearts of men, meaning that beasthood is something inherent to mankind, and that the Old Blood simply serves as a means to bring it out. Despite Carroll's warnings, one of the other scholars, called Laurence, would remain convinced that the Old Blood was a necessary tool to elevate mankind.
The blood makes us human, makes us more than human, makes us human no more.
More and more expeditions were conducted to the labyrinth in order to further Byrgenwerth's research into the arcane. To assist him in the tombs, Gehrman ended up taking an apprentice by the name of Maria. The two would grow close over time, and although Maria deeply admired Gehrman, she was unaware of his curious mania towards her. In any case, Maria and Gehrman served as powerful weapons to act out the bidding of Byrgenwerth. If you're enjoying the video so far, please consider subscribing to the channel. I have a lot more From Software related content planned for the future that I'm sure you will like. Back to the video. Sometime after the discovery of the labyrinths, Byrgenwerth would hear news of a washed-up carcass of a great one near a fishing hamlet.
There you are. Finally, my precious sacrifice.
Without a moment's hesitation, Master Willem would order a group of his students to investigate the hamlet and recover anything that may aid their research. The group that conducted the raid on the fishing hamlet, at the very least, included Laurence, Maria, and Gehrman. The raid was brutal, and unspeakable atrocities were committed. As a result of their proximity to the carcass of a great one, the minds and bodies of the villagers in the fishing hamlet had changed drastically. They began to worship the great one's corpse and refused to let anyone near it. But this was not enough to stop Byrgenwerth. The villagers were slaughtered, and under the orders of Master Willem, their skulls were split open and searched for eyes.
Byrgenwerth.
Fetch me eyes.
Byrgenwerth.
Be they round,
Blasphemous murderers.
be they young.
Blood-crazed fiends.
Fetch me eyes.
Atonement for the wretches.
For my brain.
By the wrath of Mother Goth.
More eyes.
Mercy for the poor wizened child.
I need more.
Mercy. Oh, please.
Upon reaching the carcass of the Great One cause, the scholars made two discoveries. Firstly, her body was teeming with tiny cosmic parasites, and secondly, she was pregnant. The parasites are likely responsible for the village's drastic transformation, and it could also very well be the cause of Koz's death. Either that, or she suffered a maternal death as a result of her pregnancy. In any case, Byrgenwerth would violate Koz's pregnant corpse by ripping out the umbilical cord from her unborn child. The umbilical cords of infant great ones are lined with eyes, and Provost Willem sought the cord in order to elevate his being and thoughts to those of a great one. But Koz would not let the fiends get away without retribution. Though she may have perished in our plane of existence, the Great Ones are multi-dimensional beings, thus she is not truly dead. As punishment for the vile acts Byrgenwerth committed, Koz would condemn them to a nightmare. All the blood-crazed fiends involved in the massacre, and all those who would follow in their path, would be sentenced to the hunter's nightmare following their death. The curse Koz placed upon Byrgenwerth was not just limited to them. All those whose teachings derived from Byrgenwerth, including the Healing Church and the Hunters, would be held accountable for their forefathers' sins. Following their demise in the waking world, those who have succumbed to the bloodlust are taken to the nightmare. Here they wander aimlessly, slavering like beasts. After retrieving the orphan of Koz's cord, Byrgenwerth would return home, unaware of the bleak fate that awaits them.
Curse the fiends, their children too, and their children forever true.
Master Willem, I've come to bid you farewell.
Oh, I know. You think now to betray me.
No, but you will never listen.
Dissatisfied with Master Willem's methods and way of thinking, Laurence would leave Byrgenwerth. The two had conflicting ideologies about the pathway to mankind's evolution. Willem believed it was eyes and insight, and Laurence believed it was the old blood. Along with Laurence, Gehrman, Maria, and Mikolash would also leave Byrgenwerth, either agreeing with his beliefs or simply being disgusted by Willem's methods. Some have speculated that Carol also left with Laurence, based on the rune workshop tool description that states Provost Willem would have been proud of Carol's ruins, implying that he did not get to see Carol's ruins himself. but the Japanese text makes no such insinuation, simply saying that not relying upon blood is something that is close to Headmaster Willem's ideals. So, we can safely assume that Carol remained a scholar of Byrgenwerth. Although Master Willem felt betrayed, he did not attempt to stop Laurence. He only asked that he remembers their adage.
We are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open.
Fear the old blood. I must take my leave.
After leaving Byrgenwerth, Laurence would go on to found the Healing Church. Now, many have concluded that Laurence died before the Healing Church was founded, based on a statement made by game director Miyazaki, but this simply cannot be true, as there are many pieces of evidence in the game that would contradict this. So let's examine exactly what was said in the interview. Miyazaki references the cutscene we receive after touching Laurence's skull in the Grand Cathedral. He says, "That's meant to give you a look into the memory of Laurence, who appears in the cutscene as well. His skull served as the start of the Healing Church itself, but it's taken the form of a twisted beast. There's a lot you can imagine from that." Now we must keep in mind that this interview was conducted in Japanese, and what we are reading is the English translation of that interview. We unfortunately don't have access to the original Japanese text, but it is highly likely that whoever translated the interview was not aware of the lore of the game when doing so. In any case, let's examine the sentence. His skull served as the start of the Healing Church itself. Note how Miyazaki specifically references Laurence's skull and not his death. The problem I believe with the translation is the word start. A better word that would make everything make sense is foundation. Laurence's skull would serve as the foundation of the Healing Church. At the entrance of the Grand Cathedral, we find a note that reads, "Heir to the ritual of blood, purveyor of ministration, place your hand on the altar's sacred covering and inscribe Master Laurence's adage upon your flesh." Laurence's beastly skull serves as the foundation of the church's philosophy, a reminder of the adage he took, and a warning of the beastly power of the old blood. This is further supported by the description of the beast's embrace rune dropped by Laurence, which states that knowledge of the beast's embrace became a foundation of the Healing Church. This is the conclusion I personally came to after hours of contemplation, and the timeline of events I propose moving forward will be contingent on the assumption that Laurence was alive at the time of the Healing Church's conception. After establishing the church, Laurence would become the first vicar and begin implementing the practice of blood ministration. Using the blood they extracted from Abritus and whatever other sources of old blood they found in the labyrinth, Laurence would begin grooming blood saints to serve as vessels for the old blood. This effectively increased their supply of old blood, albeit in a diluted form. Whenever their supply of old blood ran low, the church would employ tomb prospectors to retrieve more of it from the labyrinth. News would quickly spread about the church's miraculous healing blood. People would come in droves to experience its holy power, unaware of its origin or the beastly consequences it holds. Yharnam would eventually become renowned for its blood healing, attracting sickly travelers from all sorts of regions. Laurence had obtained all the test subjects he could ever hope for, but he would soon become privy to the dangers of the old blood. The imbibement of blood quickly became a recreational practice in Yharnam. People would begin using the old blood for its intoxicating effect rather than its healing properties. The citizens of Yharnam were quite literally drunk with blood, but they would soon experience a rude awakening. Excessive hair growth, elongated limbs, sharp claws, and a hunger for flesh. Those who overly indulged in the old blood would begin morphing into bloodthirsty beasts. This is unfortunately not the first time humanity has succumbed to the scourge of the beast. Long ago, before Byrgenwerth discovered the labyrinths, lived the people of Laurence. Some players are under the impression that Laurence was a place outside of the labyrinth, due to it being described as a tragic land that was devoured by sands. However, the first part of the description of the ailing Laurence chalice makes it clear that Laurence was part of the labyrinth. A chalice that breaks the labyrinth seal, or in Japanese, one of the chalices which breaks the seal of the underground ruins. All the chalice dungeons that we access were once part of the underground labyrinth beneath Yharnam. It should be noted, however, that we are not visiting the actual labyrinths themselves. The chalice dungeons are effectively dreamlands that reflect parts of the labyrinth at specific points in time. This is why they are only accessible through the hunter's dream and require rituals to gain access to. Laurence is located in the deeper parts of the labyrinth, and the denizens of the place are likely descendants of the Pthumerians. Whatever the case is, we know that Laurence was ravaged by the scourge of the beast. They too must have fell into the temptation of the old blood, and I speculate this is what caused the Great Ones to leave the labyrinth and our plane of existence altogether. They were made aware of mankind's insatiable lust for power and refused to be exploited for their benefit. Of course, kin Great Ones like Abritus were unable to leave, and now the ruin that befell Laurence is about to repeat itself in Yharnam.
So you're intent on hunting beasts, even if they are... Indeed, Gehrman. It won't be long.
With the Beast Scourge manifesting in Yharnam, Laurence would need a way to cull the beasts without causing a panic in the city. This led him to his old colleague Gehrman. Gehrman would establish the Hunters Guild, a group dedicated to hunting beasts. As the first hunter, Gehrman's equipment and fighting style would serve as the basis of all future hunters. He placed an emphasis on engaging the beasts with speed, and therefore made use of lighter attire. His trick weapon, the burial blade, had the ability to transform, allowing him to quickly adapt to different combat situations. It should be noted that despite his brutal efficiency, Gehrman never took pleasure in the hunts. He viewed it as a dirge of farewell, wishing only that his prey might rest in peace, never again to awaken to another harrowing nightmare. At the hunter's workshop, Gehrman would train and equip new recruits to face the beasts of Yharnam. The hunters operated under the cover of night, in order to keep the church's dark secret from seeing the light of day. Gehrman's first apprentice, Maria, surprisingly did not join him in the hunt. After the fishing Hamlet massacre, Maria could no longer bear to partake in any more violence. In fact, she cast her beloved weapon, Rakuyo, into a dark well at the village, the very same day of the incident. Maria now resides in the church's grand cathedral, serving as a caretaker for their numerous patients. In the early days of the church, they would conduct horrific experiments on the poor souls who came to them for help, possibly as a form of payment for blood healing, or more likely, against their will. After seeing the corpse of the Great One cause washed ashore, Laurence hypothesized that the Great Ones may be linked to the ocean, and thus began his experiments in an attempt to contact them. Burr holes were created through the subject's skulls through the process of trepanation. After the opening was created, water, likely infested with the parasites from Koz's body, was poured into the patient's skull. The fluid writhed inside their head, significantly expanding it over time. The fact that many of the patients managed to survive this grueling procedure must be in no small part due to the old blood. Although even if they survived, most of the patients lost their sanity. A select few of the subjects who made it through the process developed the power to call upon the cosmos. But because they were unable to fulfill their task as emissaries, they were deemed as failures. It is uncertain why Maria decided to oversee these experiments, given their inhuman nature. But it is well established that she treated the patients with care, with many of them referring to her fondly and calling for her by name.
Lady Maria, please, take my hand. Please, help me. Don't let me drown.
Perhaps Laurence was able to convince her that what they were doing was for the greater good. Or perhaps she did not have the means to stop his ambitions, and thus settle for easing the pain of his victims. Either way, the guilt from all of Maria's actions thus far ended up taking a hefty toll on her, and as a result, she took her own life. After Lady Maria passed on, she would become the first of many to be taken to the Hunter's Nightmare. Once Gehrman heard the news, he fell into a deep state of despair and secluded himself in the Hunter's workshop, clinging to Maria's hair ornament that he recovered from her lifeless body. In the depths of misery and madness, Gehrman crafts a porcelain doll in memory of Maria. The care put into the doll's creation is both remarkable and unsettling, a testament to the deep love Gehrman had for his student. Even with Maria dead and Gehrman in despair, Laurence remained determined to pursue his dream of evolution and was willing to use any underhanded means to achieve this dream. The description of the antidote item reads, small medicinal tablets that counteract poison, used to treat Ashen blood, the baffling sickness that ravaged Old Yharnam long ago. These tablets only provide short-term relief. The Ashen blood ailment eventually triggered the spread of the beastly scourge. From this, we can gather quite a bit of information. Old Yharnam, a sub-district of Yharnam, was plagued by a strange illness called Ashen blood. The disease was somehow related to poison. And lastly, it triggered the Beast Scourge to spread, or in Japanese, it triggered its proliferation. What likely happened was that the healing church used copious amounts of old blood to treat the Ashen blood sickness, thus causing the Beast Scourge to proliferate. But just how did this poisonous Ashen blood ailment arise in the first place? Well, the description of the poison knife reads, a knife slathered in poison, often used for self-defense by special doctors in the healing church. This means that the healing church had access to poison, and enough of it to slather their weapons. With this in mind, it is not a stretch to say that they could have used this same poison to cause the Ashen blood sickness, effectively forcing the residents of Old Yharnam to make use of the church's healing blood. How the poison was distributed is unclear, but most likely it was through their water source. Due to the massive number of people in Old Yharnam making use of the old blood, beasts would start forming at a rapid rate, and soon the place would become overrun by the scourge. The hunters were dispatched to deal with the mess, but they were severely outnumbered, and with Gehrman out of commission, they were severely underpowered. The church would try to bolster the ranks of the hunters by stipulating that all outsiders who desire their healing blood must join in on the hunt. But this too would fail. The beasts of Old Yharnam had grown too ferocious. Laurence knew that he would need otherworldly power to stop them. After traveling to Gehrman's workshop, Laurence would explain the dire situation to him, and together they would beckon the moon presence for assistance. The great ones that inhabit the nightmare are sympathetic in spirit and often answer when called upon. But to call upon a great one must make an offering, something cosmic in nature and something that would draw their attention. The umbilical cord of an infant great one. The source of the cord Laurence used to beckon the moon presence is unclear. It could be the one they recovered from the Orphan of Cos, but it is unlikely that Willem would have just let Laurence leave with it. Before being patched out the game, the workshop third umbilical cord stated that it originated from a child of the Vile Bloods, descendants of the Pthumerians that currently reside in Castle Cainhurst. This would suggest that the father of said child is once again Formless Odin, given his interest in corrupted blood. The Vile Blood hunter Alfred also states,
once, a scholar betrayed his fellows at Byrgenwerth and brought forbidden blood back with him to Cainhurst Castle.
This could mean that Laurence exchanged the old blood for the umbilical cord of an infant Great One conceived by the Vile Bloods. Whatever the case may be, the cord granted Laurence and Gehrman an audience with the Moon Presence. In response to their plea, the Great One would create the Hunter's Dream, a dreamland based on the Hunter's Workshop. Here, special hunters chosen by the Moon Presence would be revived upon their death, allowing them to continually fight the Scourge of the Beast. However, for its aid, the Moon Presence would demand a steep toll. Every Great One loses its child, and then yearns for a surrogate. The word surrogate does not refer to surrogate mothers, as some have claimed. It refers to a replacement for their lost child. The Japanese text confirms this, stating that every Great One loses its infant and then desires another. Gehrman was taken as the Moon Presence's surrogate. He would be trapped in the Hunter's Dream, unable to return to the waking world. Here he would remain as a guide for future hunters of the dream.
Farewell, Laurence. I await the realization of your ministration.
Djura, an old hunter dispatched to fight the beasts of Old Yharnam, would become the first hunter of the dream, chosen by the Moon Presence. Using his newfound power, he would attempt to cleanse Old Yharnam from the Scourge. However, not everything would go to plan. The beckoning of the Moon Presence caused the appearance of the Red Moon, and when the Red Moon hangs low, the line between man and beast is blurred. The Red Moon is synonymous with the Moon Presence, and its proximity to our plane of existence accelerates the rate at which the Beast Scourge develops. It is never explained why this is the case, but my theory is that being exposed to things of a cosmic nature drives one insane, and this weak mental state makes it easier for the Scourge of the Beast to manifest. We know from the Clawmark rune that beasthood is a deep instinct present within mankind, so it makes sense why madness would bring this to surface. There are actually several examples in-game of strong emotions suddenly triggering the Beast Scourge. Whatever the reason may be, the Moon Presence's proximity worsened the state of Old Yharnam. Despite not being able to die, Djura felt defeated and could not bear to kill any more. He is said to have been both uncommonly kind and dreadfully foolish.
There's nothing more horrific than a hunt. In case you fail to realize, the things you hunt, they're not beasts, they're people.
Sympathizing with the beasts of Old Yharnam, Djura renounced his hunter vows and was severed from the Hunter's Dream. After realizing there was no saving Old Yharnam, Laurence and the church sealed it off from the rest of the city and burned the place to the ground that moonlit night. Djura now stays in the ashy remains of Old Yharnam, protecting its beastly inhabitants from any foolish hunters who would dare enter the place.
You there! Hunter! Didn't you see the warning? Turn back at once, or the hunter will face the hunt.
After the fall of Old Yharnam, Laurence finally saw the error of his ways. In an attempt to force mankind's evolution, he had forgotten the adage he swore. Laurence would desperately search for a way to stop the Scourge from spreading and save Gehrman from the Moon Presence. But it was all too late. The Beast Scourge had already taken root in him. Laurence would end up transforming into the first cleric beast. Due to their heavy indulgence in the old blood, clerics would often transform into the most hideous of beasts. When we find Laurence in the Hunter's Nightmare, his body is surrounded by an inextinguishable flame. This is likely a symbolic punishment for burning Old Yharnam to the ground. His body now perpetually burns, as a reminder of the destruction he caused. In the waking world, Laurence was almost certainly killed by the Healing Church assassin, Brador. After killing his compatriot, Brador would skin his carcass and wear his scalp and hide as a testimony to his sin. Laurence's skull would be taken to the Grand Cathedral, where it is displayed as a reminder to the dangers of the old blood.
Nothing changes. Such is the nature of man.
Following Laurence's demise, the Healing Church would divide into two elite factions, the School of Mensis and the Choir. The Choir was made up of the orphans of Yharnam that the church raised in their orphanage. Here they were educated in all things arcane. The members of the Choir seemed to be more aligned with the beliefs of Master Willem than Laurence was, and the eye coverings they wear are indicative of their gratitude for his teachings. The Choir sought to continue the work that began at Byrgenwerth, and thus set out to the deepest parts of the labyrinth, the Land of Eyes. Here they would recover the Great Eye's chalice, and finally have an audience with the Brightest. A Brightest would be taken by the Choir to the Altar of Despair in the very depths of the Grand Cathedral. Together with the Left Behind Great One, they would look to the skies in search of astral signs that may lead them to the rediscovery of true greatness. Using the knowledge they acquired from a Brightest, the Choir would seek to succeed where their predecessors failed by continuing the church's experiments. The description of the orphanage key states that the orphanage, shadowed by the Grand Cathedral, was a place of scholarship and experimentation, where young orphans became potent unseen thinkers for the Healing Church. This has two distinct meanings. Firstly, the orphanage served as a place to teach and raise the children of Yharnam into powerful allies of the church. And secondly, the orphanage served as a place of experimentation, where orphans would become potent unseen thinkers of the church through nefarious and twisted means. At the orphanage, we can encounter many of the creatures created through the Choir's vile experiments, but one creation in particular stands out from the rest: the Celestial Emissary. This kin Great One is what the Healing Church was trying to accomplish at the research hall with the cerebral patients and the living failures. Based on the word emissary, we can assume that this creature is able to successfully communicate with the Great Ones and the cosmos, thus fulfilling the Healing Church's goal. But this monumentous accomplishment would prove to be for naught due to the catastrophic events that would soon follow.
The sacred rite nears completion. The dream will be real. We will be granted eyes.
The School of Mensis, the other elite faction that separated from the church, would take residence in Yahagul, the unseen village. Led by Mikolash, a former scholar of Byrgenwerth, they would conduct their own sick experiments, separate from the Choir. The two groups seemed to be at odds with each other. The Choir would send their members to spy on Mensis, and in turn the School of Mensis would capture members of the Choir and torture them for information. Mensis seemed to be to some extent collaborating with the Pthumerians, evident by the bell-ringing woman and the kidnappers in the unseen village. Together they would create these horrible amalgamations of body parts, presumably in an attempt to reproduce the power of the Great Ones. Needless to say, they failed in this endeavor. Realizing they would never be able to reach the heights of the Great Ones on their own, the School of Mensis sought to make contact with them. Just like the Choir, Mensis would travel to the labyrinths beneath Yharnam and reach the land of Pthumeru Isle. Here they would find Queen Yharnam, still alive and mourning the loss of her child. Mensis would overpower the queen, shackle her, and steal her stillborn child's umbilical cord. Using Mergo's cord, they would attempt to make contact with the infant Great One at the unseen village. One must remember that although Mergo perished in our world, Great Ones exist across multiple planes. The description of Mergo's umbilical cord reads, "This cord granted Mensis audience with Mergo, but resulted in the stillbirth of their brains." This line about stillbirth of their brains have left many confused, including myself, as to why this would happen, and it is yet again due to poor translation. The following retranslation comes from Reddit user Luna Nimbus and reads, "With this cord, a failed brain was bestowed unto Mensis." This makes much more sense, given the events that followed the school's contact with Mergo. Their consciousness was transported to the Nightmare of Mensis, a dreamland created by Mergo, where the infant now resides. In the nightmare, the school would encounter a massive brain-like creature lined with eyes. The living string description in Japanese states, the gigantic brain Mensis gained in the nightmare was certainly lined with eyes on the inside, but was completely malformed or was a complete failure. This leads me to believe that the School of Mensis, or Mikolash in particular, asked Mergo for a brain lined with eyes, but Mergo, being an infant, misunderstood the request and granted them the brain of Mensis instead. Whatever the case is, the brain, or even Mergo for that matter, was not the school's true objective. A note left in the unseen village reads, "Madmen toil surreptitiously in rituals to beckon the moon, uncover their secrets." The School of Mensis is using Mergo as a lure to beckon the moon presence. In the Drained of Blood interview, Miyazaki states that, in the world of Bloodborne, babies that are treated as special in one way or the other are offered as lures to the Great Ones. The Great Ones have all lost their children because of their positions, and as a result, they are attracted to these special babies. Mergo is the special baby being used in this instance. The infant's consciousness has been trapped in the Nightmare of Mensis as a result of the ritual, and its harrowing cries are being used to attract the moon presence. Why the moon presence specifically? Well, the answer becomes clear when we look at the Japanese description of a note found in Byrgenwerth. When the red moon comes close, the boundaries of man becomes blurred. The revered Great Ones appear and shall embrace our infants. Not only does the proximity of the moon presence and the red moon accelerate the rate of the Beast Scourge, but it also blurs the boundaries between realms, allowing for other Great Ones to access our plane. The School of Mensis desires contact with the Great Ones and the cosmos above all else, and are unconcerned with what consequences that may bring. Needless to say, the Mensis ritual drove Yharnam to absolute chaos. And with the church divided, Laurence dead, and Gehrman trapped, the people of Yharnam had no one to look to for help, but a hero would soon emerge to guide them through the dark. Sometime after Gehrman formed the Hunters Guild, the Healing Church would form their own group of hunters, separate from Gehrman. The first of these Healing Church hunters was a man by the name of Ludwig, a powerful hunter who brandished the title of Holy Blade, a moniker passed down through an ancient line of heroes that date back to a very early age of honor and chivalry. Ludwig sought to pass on his ideals to the hunters of the Healing Church, creating a group of noble warriors that the people of Yharnam could look to for help. Through his valiant efforts at combating the Scourge, Ludwig would inspire more and more people to take up arms and join the hunt. He began training all those willing to become church hunters and slay the beasts that have taken hold of Yharnam. Guided by his iconic moonlight sword, he would lead his honorable Spartans into battle on nights of the hunt. Ludwig's presence would soon become associated with hope, as his return to the Grand Cathedral would signal the end of a successful hunt. Although he was a formidable force in his own right, Ludwig's prowess in battle was greatly aided by his weapon of choice, the Holy Moonlight Sword. The blade was completely different to any of the trick weapons hunters typically used. This is because it wasn't a trick weapon at all. It was an ancient relic found in the labyrinths beneath Yharnam. The Moonlight Sword clearly contained otherworldly power and allowed Ludwig to channel the abyssal cosmos to lay waste to his prey. But that's not all. The sword's power even extended outside of combat and was said to have provided Ludwig with guidance, allowing him to keep his sanity even as the Beast Scourge took root in his body. When Ludwig closed his eyes, he saw darkness, or perhaps nothingness, and that is where he discovered the tiny beings of light. Ludwig was certain that these playful dancing sprites offered guidance and emptied him of his fears in the midst of a hunt.
Good hunter, have you seen the thread of light? Just a hair, a fleeting thing.
Yet I clung to it, steeped as I was in the stench of blood and beasts.
Unfortunately, even with the Moonlight Sword at his side, Ludwig would still succumb to the plague of the beast. The Red Moon's beast-inducing power is overwhelming. Even the most noble and steadfast warriors have no choice but to give in to the bloodlust.
Beast, the great terror looms. Ludwig is coming. Have mercy. Have mercy upon us.
Ludwig would transform into a horrid beast unlike any other. He possesses 8 discernible limbs and 2 heads, one of which bears a striking resemblance to a horse. It is likely that at the time of his transformation, Ludwig merged with the horse he was riding on. Ludwig's actual head seems to have been split open and lined with eyes, suggesting that his holy Moonlight Sword was secretly granting him a massive amount of internal eyes. This is likely what allowed him to somewhat resist his beasthood and even regain part of his consciousness in the second phase of his boss fight.
Ah, you were at my side all along. My true mentor, my guiding moonlight.
Ludwig is truly a tragic figure. Even after being twisted into this hideous form and being trapped in the hunter's nightmare, he still shows concern for his disciples that he left behind.
Tell me, good hunter of the church, have you seen the light? Are my church hunters the honorable Spartans? I hoped they would be.
Unfortunately, with Ludwig's untimely departure, the healing church hunters fell into depravity. Their attire became synonymous with fear, disposing of anyone with signs of the scourge. Some of them would even find signs of the scourge where there are none at all.
Oh my! Just as I feared. Then a beast-possessed degenerate was I, as my detractors made eminently clear. Does the nightmare never end?
Ludwig was unable to create the group of noble warriors he so desired. The chivalry that he preached had long been forgotten, and the hunters he left behind would devolve into blood-crazed fiends. They too would be whisked into the hunter's nightmare. One day, the hunters disappeared, and Yharnamites began to whisper of the hunter's sin. Drunk with blood, chasing after beasts, they would pass on to the nightmare, every last one of them. In a world where immorality and cruelty are commonplace, Ludwig is one of the few characters who can be regarded as a hero, corrupted and defiled by the actions of foolish madmen, but still steadfast in his beliefs.
Even in this darkest of nights, I see the moonlight.
Oh, he's well and truly gone now. A tragic figure. But he will shame himself no longer. He died with his ideals untarnished. He was a true hero, and earned that much at least.
The demise of Ludwig marked the end of the era of the hunters. The Mensis ritual had caused most of them to become blood drunk and pass on to the hunter's nightmare. Without hunters to protect them, the citizens of Yharnam would take it upon themselves to hunt the beasts and cleanse the streets. But this was a meaningless endeavor, for as long as the Mensis ritual remains, the fate of all of those beneath the pale blood sky is sealed. However, the Yharnamites were completely oblivious to this reality, not just because of misinformation from the church, but because the ritual was being hidden. Rom, the Vacuous Spider, is a kin great one, just like Abritus. Sometime between Byrgenwerth's discovery of the arcane and the Mensis ritual, Rom ascended into her current form through the power of the Great One Cos.
Ah, Cos. Or some say Cosm. Do you hear our prayers? As you once did for the vacuous Rom. Grant us eyes. Grant us eyes.
Based on where we find Rom in the game, we can conclude that she is related to Byrgenwerth in some capacity, possibly a former scholar. Why Cos granted Rom eyes is likely related to her function. The spider hides all manner of rituals, certain to reveal nothing, for true enlightenment need not be shared. Rom's existence conceals all manner of arcane rituals, including the Mensis ritual. This prevents ordinary people who lack insight from learning about the true cosmic nature of the world. After the fishing Hamlet incident, Cos likely wanted to prevent humanity from gaining any further knowledge about the arcane, and thus ascended Rom to hide the effects of all rituals attempting to make contact with the Great Ones and the cosmos. It should be noted that Rom is not actually preventing the Mensis ritual, she is concealing it. If the player obtains enough insight, they are able to see through some of Rom's illusions, and even hear the cries of the infant Great One Mergo. Furthermore, if we travel to Yahar'gul before killing Rom, we can find a note that reads, "Behold, a pale blood sky." However, looking up at the sky, we see no such thing. This is because the red moon is being hidden. To stop the Mensis ritual, one must enter the Nightmare of Mensis, but this is not possible while Rom is still alive. The Byrgenwerth spider must be slain in order to save what remains of Yharnam from the Scourge. However, all those who remain in the city lack the knowledge or ability to do so. The hunters have all but vanished. The church is on the brink of collapse, and Byrgenwerth have sealed themselves off from the rest of the city. To save Yharnam from its doom, a mysterious outsider would eventually make their way to the city's gates. Bloodborne opens with the player character entering the city of Yharnam. To enter the city as an outsider, we must receive a transfusion of the old blood and sign a contract to become a hunter. After receiving the transfusion, we begin to hallucinate. A scourge beast crawls out from a pool of blood and attempts to grab a hold of us. But before it can reach us, it is abruptly set on fire. This is likely symbolic of the beasthood that tries to envelop us after partaking in the old blood. But we have seemingly been protected from the scourge by a force far more powerful. As our body is smothered by a group of messengers, the moon presence etches the hunter's mark into our mind, selecting us as a hunter of the dream.
Ah, you found yourself a hunter.
Upon waking up, we walk over to a nearby chair and find a handwritten scroll that reads, "Seek pale blood to transcend the hunt." This single note has been the source of great confusion amongst the Bloodborne community, but the Japanese text makes it clear that this note is scribbled in our own handwriting, meaning our character came to Yharnam with the specific goal of pale blood. This is further supported by the opening cutscene, in which the Blood Minister responds to a question about pale blood.
Oh, yeah. Pale blood.
Pale blood refers to both the moon presence and the red moon it's associated with. This is evident from the notes in the unseen village and the lecture building, which read, "Behold a pale blood sky," and the nameless moon presence, beckoned by Laurence and his associates. Pale blood. This meaning of pale blood is further confirmed by Miyazaki in the Drained of Blood interview, where he states that there are two different ways you could interpret pale blood. One is the color of the sky after you defeat the Vacuous Spider and the Mensis secret ritual is revealed, and the other is the name for the monster that comes from the moon under certain conditions. Somehow our character was already aware of the moon presence before coming to Yharnam and is seeking the Great One to transcend the hunt, or in Japanese, to complete it. While this may seem like a minor difference in wording, it does have meaningful implications about our character's motivations. The goal of completing the hunt can be interpreted in one of two ways. One, our character wishes to stop the moon presence from being beckoned, thus stopping the source of the spreading scourge and ending this particular hunt. Or two, the good hunter wishes to end the hunt permanently by slaying the moon presence and thus preventing the red moon from descending upon humanity ever again. I tend to favor the latter interpretation. The moon presence's proximity blurs the boundaries of man, accelerating the Beast Scourge and allowing other great ones to descend into our plane. It is in essence the root cause of what brought calamity to Yharnam. Even if we stop the Mensis ritual, as long as the moon presence continues to exist, there is always the looming danger of it being beckoned again. To truly complete the hunt, the moon presence must perish. How our character came upon this knowledge is a mystery. In fact, we know almost next to nothing about our past. The blood transfusion has left the good hunter's memory a blur, causing us to forget both our purpose and our past. All we can surmise is that we are an outsider from a foreign land and had to travel by the cover of darkness to stay out of sight. Extremely vague and mysterious, but our background matters not. What's important is what we came here to do. Even without memory, the hunter recognizes their own handwriting. This note must be the reason we decided to step foot in this horrid city, and for now, it is the only source of guidance we have. To put an end to the disaster that struck Yharnam and prevent it from happening again, we must uncover the mysteries the city holds and seek Paleblood. After dying for the first time, or making it to a lantern, we will be taken to the hunter's dream. Here we find the doll that Gehrman crafted and see that it has been brought to life through the power of the moon presence. The doll serves the hunter of the dream and allows one to channel the blood echoes of defeated enemies into their own strength.
You will hunt beasts, and I will be here for you to embolden your sickly spirit.
Blood echoes can be thought of as the echoes of someone's will present in their blood as they die. As a hunter of the dream, we are able to absorb the blood echoes of defeated enemies, courtesy of the moon presence. Inside the workshop, we find Gehrman, old and withered. There's no telling how long he has been trapped in the dream for. His days of hunting are long past, and now only serves as an advisor.
It has been a long dream, a very long dream. Since I can no longer hunt, this is all I can do. I made a promise to a dear friend. A promise.
Just past Gehrman, we find a note he seemingly left for us. To escape this dreadful hunter's dream, halt the source of the spreading scourge of beasts, lest the night carry on forever. The source of the spreading scourge is the red moon. To stop it, we must silence the cries of the infant Great One Mergo, who is being used as a lure to beckon the moon presence. Of course, the hunter would be unaware of this at this point. After gearing up at the workshop, the hunter begins exploring the city of Yharnam. Most of the remaining citizens are already in the process of transformation, and those who still retain their sanity are unhelpful to say the least.
This whole mess that Yharnam's in, it's all your fault. You fed it to the outsiders. Our blood's ruined, tainted by your ilk. Don't you come near me. I know your type.
It is evident from the citizens' dialogue that the people of Yharnam are under the impression that the Beast Scourge is the fault of the outsiders. No doubt this misinformation was the church's doing. A fellow outsider by the name of Gilbert is at least willing to have a conversation with us. He has no idea what Paleblood is, but points us towards the healing church.
Paleblood, you say? Never heard of it. But if it's blood you're interested in, you should try the healing church.
Unfortunately, the bridge to the cathedral ward has been blocked off by the church, and atop of it now resides a cleric beast. Returning to Gilbert, he now advises us to use an alternate route.
Yes, I see. But the Great Bridge is the only way to the Cathedral Ward, and during the hunt the bridge is closed. You could try the aqueduct.
The aqueduct takes us to the Tomb of Odin, where we find a fellow hunter, only he has succumbed to the bloodlust. Father Gascoigne is quite a tragic figure. Like us, he was an outsider that most likely came to Yharnam for its healing blood. Willingly or unwillingly, he became a hunter of the church to aid in the culling of beasts. During this time, he would start a family, acquiring a wife and 2 children, the youngest of which we can speak to before encountering him.
Who are you? I don't know your voice, but I know that smell. Are you a hunter? And please will you look for my mum? Daddy never came back from the hunt, and she went to find him. But now she's gone too. I'm all alone and scared. Really? Oh, thank you. My mum wears a red jeweled brooch. It's so big and beautiful. You won't miss it. Oh, I mustn't forget. If you find my mum, give her this music box. It plays one of Daddy's favourite songs. And when Daddy forgets us, we play it for him so he remembers. Mum's so silly running off without it.
In his blood-drunken state, Gascoigne ended up killing his own wife. The music box, which his family previously used to help him regain his senses, is no longer effective. He is nothing more than a beast now, and as a hunter, it is our job to lay him to rest.
Mr. Hunter, was it really her? Mummy? Mummy? Don't leave me alone. Mum, come home. I'm alone. I'm scared. It's not fair.
Past the Tomb of Odin, we enter the Cathedral Ward. Here we meet a hunter who still retains his sanity.
Oh, beg pardon. You may call me Alfred, protege of Master Ligurius, hunter of vile bloods.
The Vile Blood Hunter shares some information with us about Byrgenwerth and the Healing Church. Byrgenwerth is a place of old learning, and nearly everything sacred in Yharnam can be traced back to the place. If it's knowledge we seek, Byrgenwerth may be our best bet. However, the scholars have long since closed off their doors to the rest of Yharnam. Only those with the password may enter.
The password.
The password is in fact the sacred adage of the Byrgenwerth scholars, which Laurence ended up passing on to the church. To learn the adage, we must place our hand on Laurence's skull, which is currently being kept in the Grand Cathedral. Here we find Vicar Amelia, one of Laurence's many successors, deeply immersed in prayer.
Our thirst for blood satiates us, soothes our fears. Seek the old blood, but beware the frailty of men.
As we approach Amelia, her chanting stops abruptly, and an eerie silence fills the room. Her flesh then suddenly ruptures, revealing her massive beastly form. After defeating Amelia, we approach the altar displaying Laurence's skull. Touching it, we are shown one of Laurence's memories from the day he departed from Byrgenwerth. Through this vision, we learn of Byrgenwerth's cautionary adage.
Fear the old blood.
Using the adage, we are granted passage into Byrgenwerth. Shockingly, the gatekeeper that we were just speaking to appears to be long dead. At first glance, this may just be viewed as an idle attempt to generate shock value. However, there is actually a deeper meaning behind it. The gatekeeper was one of Willem's loyal servants, who remained at Byrgenwerth following the split. After discovering the eldritch truth in the labyrinth, he went mad. But even in his madness, he remained loyal to Willem, determined to fulfill his duty. On his corpse, we find a fragment of Madman's knowledge, which states that making contact with eldritch wisdom is a blessing, for even if it drives one mad, it allows one to serve a grander purpose for posterity. Through the power of the Eldritch Truth, Willem's gatekeeper was able to fulfill his purpose even in death, which was to prevent anyone who does not fear the old blood from entering Byrgenwerth. To reach Byrgenwerth, we must pass through the Forbidden Woods, a very peculiar forest that stands out from the rest of Yharnam. Throughout the area, we find these massive gravestones jutting out from the ground. They could not have been possibly placed there by ordinary humans. The Hintertomb Chalice description states that the Hintertombs are the peripheral catacombs of the old underground labyrinth. To this day, the Watchers continue to expand the Hintertombs, unceremonious catacombs filled with graves and death. This could suggest that the Pthumerians eventually ended up expanding the Hintertombs to the point where they reached the surface, with the Forbidden Woods serving as some sort of sacred burial site. But what creature would warrant a gravestone so large? Well, the official art book of Bloodborne refers to these gravestones as the tombstones of the Great Ones. This has some serious implications as to just how many Great Ones there once were, and whether these Great Ones were killed or died by other means. It could also be possible that these gravestones were put up symbolically after the Great Ones departed. Whatever the case is, the proximity of the Forbidden Woods to Byrgenwerth makes sense as to why they were the first ones to discover the labyrinth. It also makes sense why the forest was deemed forbidden, given the secret it holds. At the end of the woods, we encounter a boss called the Shadows of Yharnam. Upon first encountering them, one might make the association of these enemies with the city of Yharnam. However, this is incorrect. Yharnam in this case refers to the Pthumerian queen. These shadows act as her servants or bodyguards. The fact that they are here must mean that the queen is nearby. After defeating the shadows, we finally make our way into Byrgenwerth. The once great college of Byrgenwerth is now almost completely desolate. There are almost no scholars in sight. All we find are these strange otherworldly creatures that are likely the result of Byrgenwerth's experiments with the arcane. These creatures, like Rom, the celestial emissary, and Abritus, are classified as kin. Of course, they are much lesser versions, having very limited cosmic powers, nowhere near the level of a great one. Inside the college, we find that a member of the choir has managed to infiltrate Byrgenwerth, likely seeking to steal whatever knowledge and relics they could get their hands on. Out on the lunarium facing the lake, we find Master Willem in a decrepit state. He seems to be in the process of becoming a kin, but whatever he has done to himself has left him immobile and incapable of speech. Willem now spends the rest of his days rocking in his chair aimlessly, abandoned or left behind by his former students. A fitting end given all the atrocities he committed. In an attempt to provide one last bit of guidance, Willem musters up what little strength he has left and points his staff towards the Moonside Lake. Jumping into the lake, we enter the domain of the Vacuous Spider. She has hidden herself in this strange pocket dimension that is separate from the waking world, but also not a dreamland. Of note, Rom is one of the only bosses in the game who will not attack us until provoked, but her demise is necessary to save Yharnam. Madmen toil surreptitiously in rituals to beckon the moon, and when the red moon hangs low, the line between man and beast is blurred. But the spider hides all manner of rituals, certain to reveal nothing. To halt the source of the spreading scourge, the hunter must slay Rom. After defeating Rom, we spot Queen Yharnam in the distance. One might question how the Pthumerian queen was able to invade Rom's dimension, but we must remember that she is no ordinary Pthumerian. The Ring of Betrothal states that in the age of the Great Ones, wedlock was a blood contract. Through this contract, Queen Yharnam likely gained immense cosmic power, evident through her boss fight in the Chalice dungeons. One of her abilities includes making copies or projections of herself. What we are seeing now is not her actual body, but most likely a projection. Queen Yharnam seems to be searching for her child Mergo, who is being used as a lure to beckon the moon presence. With Rom's illusionary barrier broken, the red moon and all its effects becomes visible. We can now hear Mergo's cries echoing throughout Yharnam and see the Amygdalan Great Ones that have descended to our plane. It is unclear whether these creatures are a species of Great Ones or just projections of a singular Great One. Patches the Spider does refer to Amygdala as a singular being, but the Amygdalan arm, which we find in the Hunter's Nightmare, is more ambiguous, reading, "the arm of a small Amygdala Great One," or in Japanese, "an arm from one of the Great Ones called Amygdala. It is from one of the smaller ones amongst them." This can be interpreted either way, but based on the fact that we never physically encounter any other of the true Great Ones in the waking world and only in dreamlands, I am of the opinion that the Amygdalas we see in our plane are projections. With the ritual secret broken, we are instructed to seek the Nightmare Newborn and silence its harrowing cries, as this is what the Mensis ritual is contingent on. Mergo has been trapped in the Nightmare of Mensis. To reach the nightmare, we must make our way through Yahagul, the unseen village, where the Mensis ritual was conducted. The Amygdalas in this area are somewhat hostile and are seemingly trying to stop us from interfering with the ritual. This could suggest that they want the ritual to proceed, as it allows the Great Ones to access our dimension, or that they are simply aiding the School of Mensis as a favor for worshipping Amygdala. As a last line of defense, to prevent anyone from foiling their plans, the Pthumerian bell-ringing woman collaborating with the School of Mensis summoned the One Reborn, or more appropriately in Japanese, the Ones Reborn. This grotesque abomination seems to be comprised of dozens of decaying body parts, and was likely the school's final failed attempt at recreating a Great One. After disposing of the monstrosity, we proceed into a room containing a massive number of mummified corpses. These bodies are the remains of the School of Mensis, evident by the cages they wore over their heads to facilitate contact with the Great Ones. At the end of the room is the body of Mikolash. By touching it, we are transported to the lecture building, an intermediary zone between nightmares. This building was formerly a part of Byrgenwerth, but at some point got pulled into the nightmare realm. The lecture theatre key reads, "Today, the two-story lecture building is adrift in the nightmare, but once it was a place of reflection, where scholars learned of history and archaeology. It is unclear what caused the building to get ripped away into the cosmos, but it is likely related to the arcane experiments that caused the scholars' bodies to morph into this slime-like state." At the end of the second-floor hallway, we open an abyssal door that allows us to finally enter the Nightmare of Mensis. Navigating this hellish landscape proves to be a challenging task, as all those who enter the nightmare must face the deadly gaze of the brain of Mensis. The brain has been weaponized by the school, binding it in chains and hanging it from a tall tower. Even though the brain was rotted and malformed, it was a great one nonetheless, and all those exposed to its piercing eyes are rapidly inflicted with frenzy, resulting in devastating amounts of damage. Of note, if the hunter drops the brain from the tower, they will find it to be surprisingly docile and cooperative. The Great One will not attempt to attack us, and will even reward us with an item for making contact with the creature. This once again speaks to the sympathetic and elusive nature of the Great Ones, even lesser and flawed Great Ones like the Brain of Mensis. To reach Mergo, we must first face Mikolash, leader of Mensis and the host of the Nightmare.
No, we shall not abandon the dream. No one can catch us. No one can stop us now.
The word host may mistakenly lead one to believe that Mikolash is the source of the nightmare, but this is not the case. Rather than the source, he is its custodian, in a similar manner to Gehrman being the host of the hunter's dream and Maria being the host of the hunter's nightmare. They are there to protect and uphold the dreamland. After repeatedly chasing Mikolash around the nightmare, we manage to corner the madman and put an end to his miserable existence. At the very top of Mergo's loft, we yet again encounter Queen Yharnam. Despite finding her child in the nightmare, she lacks the ability to free Mergo from this cruel fate. It is up to us to stop the Mensis ritual and de-shackle the infant Great One. As we ascend to the Lunarium, Mergo's cries intensify. Notably, the infant Great One seems to lack a physical form, just like its father Odin. Before we can reach Mergo's cradle, it is suddenly enveloped by a strange being, referred to as Mergo's wet nurse. Based on the trophy we get for defeating the wet nurse, we can infer that the creature is a Great One. However, whether this Great One is an extension of Mergo or a separate entity remains unclear. At first, the wet nurse may seem to be formless like Mergo, comprised of only clots and rags, but on closer inspection of her arms, we can see that they are very much physical, even bearing sharp claws. Even in spite of this fact, I still lean towards the wet nurse being a projection of Mergo, similar to how the Orphan of Kos manifested himself in the hunter's nightmare. The wet nurse's design is also unlike any of the other Great Ones. It is the only Great One in the game that wears clothing and brandishes weapons. As a matter of fact, the wet nurse bears a striking resemblance to the shadows of Yharnam, who protect Mergo's mother. With all this in mind, I believe Mergo created the wet nurse to serve as her guardian and protector after the Nightmare of Mensis was created. However, it may be possible that the wet nurse is just another Great One that was drawn to Mergo after losing their child. In any case, by defeating the wet nurse, who has enveloped itself around Mergo, we are able to free the infant Great One from this horrible nightmare, allowing the child's consciousness to pass on. As thanks for laying Mergo to rest, Queen Yharnam will bow graciously upon returning to her. With Mergo's cries silenced, the Mensis ritual has been stopped, meaning the moon presence should no longer be beckoned to our realm. We have successfully halted the source of the spreading scourge, thus completing our task as Hunter of the Dream. But there still remains one last prey that we must slaughter to end the hunt for good: Paleblood. Returning to the Hunter's Dream, we find the workshop to be on fire.
Oh, how magnificently the flame burns. Hunters are held here to be sent on horrific hunts, their souls rotted by blood and madness. We've no need for this accursed abode. Let flame cleanse this house of horrors.
Good hunter, you have come. Dawn will soon break. This night and this dream will end. Gehrman awaits you at the foot of the great tree.
Beyond the previously locked gate at the edge of the Hunter's Dream, we find Gehrman in what seems to be a graveyard for all the past hunters of the dream.
Good hunter, you've done well. The night is near its end. Now, I will show you mercy. You will die, forget the dream, and awake under the morning sun. You will be freed from this terrible hunter's dream.
Gehrman presents us with an option to be freed from the Hunter's Dream. All we have to do is submit our life to him, after which we will awaken in the waking world, no longer bound to the dream. However, this ending does not align with my interpretation of the Good Hunter's objective. Furthermore, it leaves Gehrman trapped in the Hunter's dream, forever destined to be the Moon Presence's surrogate. Despite Gehrman's tough demeanor and determination to set us free, his true feelings can be found through his dialogue while asleep.
Oh, Laurence, what's taking you so long? I've grown too old for this. Of little use now, I'm afraid. Oh, Laurence, Master Willem, somebody help me. Unshackle me, please. Anybody. I've had enough of this dream. The night blocks all sight. Oh, somebody, please.
Based on the number of graves in the Hunter's dream, Gehrman has been trapped here for a substantial amount of time, and with this time, his resolve has dwindled. He is unaware that Laurence has long passed and is not coming to save him. To set Gehrman free from this dreadful fate, we must lay him to rest, just as he wished to do for us. But Gehrman, fearing the consequences that we might face in his absence, will not go out without a fight.
What? Looking to free me? What were you thinking? If I die, you are to be next. What is it you want from this horrific nightmare? Oh, it doesn't matter. It always comes down to the hunter's helper to clean up after these sorts of messes. Tonight, Gehrman joins the hunt.
As the first hunter who paved the way for all those who came after him, it is no shock that even weathered and old, Gehrman is a force to be reckoned with.
You must accept your death. Be freed from the night.
In addition to his incredible speed and agility, through his contact with the cosmos, Gehrman developed the ability to harness the power of the arcane.
Time is a cruel, cruel thing. Haven't you noticed?
It is almost terrifying to think of the strength that Gehrman bolstered in his prime. After an extremely fierce battle of wills, we are finally able to set Gehrman free.
The night and the dream were long.
Almost immediately after Gehrman passes on, the Moon Presence descends.
O Flora of the moon, of the dream.
The hunter's body is instinctively drawn to the Great One and seems to be almost moving on its own. The Moon Presence then grabs our body and pulls us in close, wrapping its numerous tentacles all around the hunter. In a twisted way, it is almost reminiscent of how a parent would embrace their child. We have now replaced Gehrman as the Great One's surrogate and custodian of the hunter's dream, ultimately not changing anything in the grand scheme of things. The looming threat of the Moon Presence and the Red Moon remains. To truly break the cycle, we must obtain the power to resist the Great One's cosmic influence. We are thinking on the basis of planes. What we need are more eyes. Eyes symbolize the truth Master Willem sought. Disillusioned by the limits of human intellect, Master Willem looked to beings from higher planes for guidance, and sought to line his brain with eyes in order to elevate his thoughts. The formation of internal eyes has been associated with those who have to some extent harnessed the power of the cosmos. There are multiple ways one can obtain these eyes. The Church did it forcibly with their experiments. Ludwig obtained it through frequent exposure to an arcane relic. But one surefire way to line your brain with eyes is by consuming the umbilical cord of an infant Great One. Cords of eyes have been one of Bloodborne's most misunderstood aspects, in heavy part due to translation issues. The NA version of the game refers to them as 1/3 of umbilical cord, while the EU version calls them third umbilical cord. These translations do not effectively convey the true value of the umbilical cords of infant Great Ones. A better translation from the Japanese text would be third eye cords, or cords of the third eye. This conveys two meanings. Firstly, these cords allow one to unlock a metaphorical third eye, allowing one's mind to function on transcendental planes of thought. Secondly, it requires 3 of these cords to do so. This is also hinted at by a note in the lecture building, which reads 3 third cords. There are a total of 4 umbilical cords in the game. One is obtained from Gehrman's old workshop, where he and Laurence beckon the moon presence. As stated earlier, this cord likely originated from the child of a vile blood and the Great One Odin. Another cord can be acquired from imposter Yusefka, a member of the choir, who stole the cord from Byrgenwerth to use herself. This is most likely the umbilical cord they retrieved from the Orphan of Kos. It should be noted that Yusefka is not pregnant as many have thought. Her dialogue makes it clear that she is in the process of gaining internal eyes after consuming the umbilical cord.
God, I'm nauseous. Have you felt this? It's progressing. I can see things. How they writhe inside my head. It's rather rapturous.
The nausea can be explained by the raised intracranial pressure she is experiencing as a result of lining her brain with eyes. The next cord you come across is from the child of Ariana, a descendant of the Vile Bloods. To no one's surprise, the father is yet again the formless Odin. And the final umbilical cord is received upon releasing Mergo from the nightmare. Out of these 4 cords, only 3 is required to unlock your third eye, so it is up to you if you want to spare either Ariana's child or the false Yusefka. Yusefka is definitely more deserving of death, considering that she forcibly experiments on the citizens of Yharnam, turning them into celestial minions. However, Ariana's infant is doomed to die anyway, being the child of a Great One. With 3 cords in the Good Hunter's possession, we can use them to gain enough eyes on the inside to unlock our metaphorical third eye. This allows the hunter to resist the moon presence's otherworldly power and engage it in battle. Paleblood serves as Bloodborne's true final boss, and as a result, many have tried to assign malicious human-like motives to the Great One. I personally find this to be redundant. Great Ones operate on transcendental planes of thought. It would not be productive or feasible to fully understand their intentions, especially when the majority of theories rely on speculation. Nonetheless, I will present my theory for completion's sake. We know 2 things for certain about the Great One's motivations. 1. Every Great One loses its child and then yearns for a surrogate. And 2. The Great Ones that inhabit the nightmare are sympathetic in spirit and often answer when called upon. Based on these 2 pieces of information, I propose a very simple theory. Laurence and Gehrman beckon the moon presence to receive aid in controlling the scourge of the beasts. In response to this, the Great One created the Hunter's Dream and allowed selected hunters to utilize the dream's power. As compensation for this task, the moon presence took Gehrman as a surrogate. As long as Gehrman remained in the dream, the Great One would continue to assist them in the hunt. Now that Gehrman has been freed, the moon presence desires a replacement. Of course, the good hunter does not desire such a fate, which has resulted in this climatic battle. We can also take this theory one step further, but keep in mind that we are getting into heavy speculative territory. I propose that the reason why the moon presence desires a surrogate in the hunter's dream is to farm blood echoes. We, as a hunter of the dream, have been given power from the moon presence that allows us to absorb the blood echoes of defeated enemies. Furthermore, the Moon Rune, which is undoubtedly associated with the Moon Presence, allows you to gain extra blood echoes. Now, think about what happens to all these blood echoes once a Hunter of the Dream fulfills his purpose and is severed from the dream by Gehrman. It all goes to the Moon Presence. Upon dying, Hunters of the Dream leave behind bloodstains that contain all their blood echoes. This is subsequently absorbed by the Moon Presence. To add more merit to this theory, if the player defeats Gehrman and becomes the Moon Presence's new surrogate, they will absorb Gehrman's blood echoes. However, if the player defeats Gehrman and then resists the Moon Presence, they will not. This is likely because the Great One saw you as a potential threat and absorbed the echoes before you could. Blood echoes serve as a source of strength, which would lead one to believe that the Moon Presence desires blood echoes to increase its power. However, I would like to think that a Great One capable of functioning on transcendental planes of thought would have a more complex desire than power. In any case, upon slaying the Moon Presence, our character absorbs the Great One's massive supply of blood echoes, the likes of which it gathered over the span of countless hunts. This serves as a catalyst that triggers our ascension into an infant Great One, quite possibly a true Great One. There is no real evidence for this other than the trophy description, which states, "You became an infant Great One, lifting humanity into its next childhood." Or in Japanese, the evolution of man has entered its next infancy. This seems to imply that the Hunter's transformation was such a monumental achievement that it signified a new era for mankind. This must mean that the Hunter's ascension is superior to all the kin Great Ones, like Rom, Abritus, and the Celestial Emissary. It would also be thematically appropriate for the player to finally achieve what Byrgenwerth and the Healing Church was so desperately striving for. Going off this theory, it would seem that the recipe to create a true Great One was a combination of 3 third eye chords plus the blood echoes of a powerful Great One. In other words, it was a union of both Willem's and Laurence's philosophy, eyes on the inside plus the old blood. The outcome of the childhood's beginning-ending remains highly ambiguous. We have no idea what effect we will have on humanity as a Great One, and if we even retain any semblance of our former self. But I suppose this is the price the Hunter had to pay in order to defeat the Moon Presence and put an end to the hunt. Thus ends the tale of the Hunter, who sacrificed his own humanity to save mankind.
Oh, brave Hunter.
Oh, kind Hunter.
Honorable Hunter.
Farewell, my keen Hunter.
Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel and supporting me on Patreon. As a patron, you get early access to my videos, exclusive content, and your name in the credits. Thank you to all my current patrons. Your contributions are greatly appreciated. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, take care everyone.